Testing, testing. Okay. Okay. The recursive spiral of death. Ah, I love it when you get the 2-screen view of PowerPoint. It's so much nicer. Because then it shows you what your next slide is, so you can know what's coming up. No, because it's just literally mirrored this one to that one. Yeah, the way they have this whole campus set up is awful. Like, I don't know, I've been complaining about this for a year, but you need to run separate cables to both so then you can. We talked about testing, right? Walk through desk checks, unit testing, integration testing, system testing. We talked about all those. Acceptance testing, which is with users. Wow, we got further than I thought. Alpha, beta. All right, installation. I'm pretty sure this is where we ended. So we got to change over the old system to the new system. There's 4 approaches. You do a direct installation. Basically, you turn the old one off and you turn the new one on. That's direct installation. Obviously, that causes problems in a lot of cases. Parallel installation, you run the old one and the new one at the same time until you decide you can get rid of the old one. What usually happens if you try to do that? What do you think people tend to do? Yeah. They just keep using the old one. They never use the new one. A lot of times in orbital shift, a manager would say, yeah, let's go forward with this scheduling process or this new scheduling software, but we're still going to let people post things on the bulletin board and we're still going to print schedules out. How do you think those went? Not well. They never started using the new software. So we always had to tell them, like, you got to just pull the plug on the old one or it just never worked. That kind of transition thing. You know, you'd get a few holdouts, like when you have Olies and half the staff can't get on computers because they're sex offenders or something. So, you know, you have to do a hybrid on that because they're like a bunch of pre-release people. So had to do more of a hybrid in those cases. Yeah, I mean, how can you live life without being able to get on a computer, right? Like, I mean, people do it, but you're gonna be hard to like even apply for a job if you can't. I mean, online applications, right? A single location installation. You know, like convenience store. There's multiple stores with success, but at the one where you try it, pull the plug on the old one. Phased installation. So start with part of it and then keep rolling it up, adding more parts of it. That would be the 4th choice there. Did she text you or anything? Has she been able to see the thing? Did she text you or anything? Can she see what's going on? I think it's probably on a delay because it's doing that YouTube thing, so it's not live, but it's fairly live. Well, you were the one that said she was waiting, so. All right. Here's a lovely graphic. Current system, you install the new one. God, stop sometimes these free scroll wheels, I love them, but well, I want to zoom in on it. I just clicked this button and got rid of the free spin. You guys use Logitech mice with the free? It's great. I love it. It's so fun to play with too. Yeah, weighted scroll wheel. So there's a yeah, I don't know. You can look at the picture. It's nothing. It's like it's what we just said. So considerations for installation, how do you convert the data? I mean, that's the trickiest part, like scheduling software. Tell them, well, all the requests that have been made for the last 6 months, you got to put them in the new system so you can dump the pile of paper slips you have in your desk. So there's always that kind of initial thing of how do you roll over all the data into the new system, and how do you correct any errors, from that. Loading from the current system's kind of the same thing. When do you plan the system shutdown? So you got to kind of put a point. This is where we're switching. And then just what cycle does a business work on? If you want to roll over a time clock, because like our software started being a time clock, if it's a 24-hour a day business, when do you switch from one thing to the other? If it's not 24-hour day, you can just kind of do it between days. But and sometimes business cycles, what do business usually run on for their calendar year? It's not usually the calendar year. Their fiscal year is often summer, is where the years switch due to taxes and things. So we had a lot of clients that were said, yeah, next year, because that whole either calendar year or fiscal year, that money was budgeted and spent the year before. They can't even think about a new expense until the next year. So, I mean, these all play together. System documentation, the next thing. Detailed information about systems design, its workings, its functionality. So remember, we talked about this before. There's two kinds: internal. So that's like part of the program. That's typically comments. There's external, which is diagrams, things outside of it. And then there's also the layer of what do you hand over to your client and what is for you as the company that developed it. There's that line drawn as well. User documentation, so how you use it. So preparing user documentation, they say here traditional source has been the information systems department. So they're kind of in charge of running the system, and they're going to create the documentation to go with it. Application-oriented documentation now is often supplied. So I think this is much more common now. If you sell someone a system, you give them the documentation with it. You don't expect them to create HR materials and things. Nice. So training information for system users. So training topics, use of the system, computer concepts. So, I mean, we did this exact thing at Orbital Shift. Every new client, we'd arrange 1 to 2 trainings where they called in as many of their staff as could come, and someone from our company went and trained them. And you'd think we're in a modern era, general computer topics. Literally, people do not know how to log in. They've never logged into a single thing in their lives. They don't have emails. So you have to take old ladies and help them through that. I did it lots of times. And whether they ever use it again, is the big question there, because there's a lack of skill there. Information system topics. So if you're installing a system at a business and they're going to manage the information of it locally, not in a cloud-based setting, they need information about that. organizational concepts, systems management, other things that could come up during training. Mostly, I mean, it depends who you're training. If you're training users, it's going to be those top two. If you're training staff, information system staff, it's going to be those bottom three. And then the hope is the philosophy of train the trainer. You want to make sure you leave with someone there that has the knowledge to train the other people. Because if you don't, then they're just always going to be coming back to you, not knowing what to do. So trying to find those key individuals that can be sort of the experts and hopefully also the evangelists of the system. Like, you need some people that are like, yeah, this is great, we need to use it, that kind of thing. System installation, if again, that's an information systems IT type problem, if they're going to run it locally. Training methods, resident expert. That's basically like what I just said. Train someone there to be the expert. Train the trainer is what I've always called it. You want to get away from being the trainer yourself. Computer-aided instruction, so tutorial videos. That's a good way to go. Formal courses. I mean, if it's a big system, a business might want someone to pass some kind of training course to say that they're competent with the system. Of course, software help. Tutorials. So, you know, those would be text-based versus the computer-aided. Interactive training manuals. We've all seen this. It flashes in one's place to click here, and you, by repetition, they're hoping you learn to use it by clicking around where they tell you to. And then sometimes you may have outside vendors. I mean, in a bigger situation, you hire someone to do the training for you. That could be another option. Here's that information in a table. Yeah, nothing really new there. Electronic performance support system. So they're basically just saying this is if you have a component where you can be trained and educated. It's embedded in the system. It's part of the system. So an EPSS, a word term I've never heard outside of this slide in this book, but there it is. So support is extremely important to users. You know, they're used to things not being standardized. They're going to be using equipment and software from different sources. So most organizations provide source by an information center or help desk. So this is, again, your local small business doesn't have a help desk, but a bigger corporation would. Your standard user needs to feel like they have somebody that they can go to get the answer if they're going to feel good about the system. At Orbital Shift, that ended up being calling me, which not my idea of who you want to be the support. How'd you guys find out Orbital Shift was hiring? Gotcha. Oh, they came in? Someone from there or someone from the internship office? Okay, gotcha. Gotcha. I mean, if you do go there, I've only said nice things, right? Yes, they are the best. The software is the best. Yes, I made it. It's the best. Supporting information system users help desk. So again, this kind of touches on that, a single point of contact. So this is, again, supporting training the trainer, the help desk there. You need to make sure they have the right answers, because otherwise it's going to just turn into phone calls and emails for you as a systems provider. So 2 conditions for successful implementation of a system. This is kind of one of the key ideas of this. Management support of the system under development, involvement of users in the development process. Now, if it's just a sales thing like Orbital Shift would have been, the same thing plays in. You need management support and you need user support. If one or the other isn't there, it'll likely get rejected. We also had to deal with owners oftentimes because they're the ones paying for it. The kind of businesses we sell to, you know, if it's a corporation, management is the ones making those spending decisions. But like the smaller businesses here, owners are usually making the spending decisions on things like that. Then the managers are managing. So you kind of end up with that 3-tier process. So some things about the implementation process. So of course, risk, commitment to the project. Wow, these, I did not animate those very well, did I? Commitment to change, extent of project definition and planning, realistic user expectations. So these are just some factors that may come into play. Commitment from to the project can come from both ends. The people developing the system and the people you're developing it for. Success factors, extent to which system is used. This is huge. If they don't use it, it's not going to be successful. That's obvious. At the same time, it's not obvious. I don't know. It just doesn't always work that way. How easy is the system to use and how reliable is it? If it's crashing all the time and people don't know how to use it, it's going to fail. User satisfaction with the system. Even if management is a little leery, if the users love it, it has a good chance of making it because they'll tell the manager, like, this is great. So, and then user demographics such as age and degree of computer experience. If you're trying to sell a computer system to a place where no one knows how to use a computer, obviously that's more difficult. Yeah. And I think we succeeded in getting orbital shift in some places where I wouldn't say the users were that savvy. We just made it so plainly simple. You click the thing, you type in a username and password. It's not rocket science. You click clock in, it's a big button. You log out. You know, like, yeah, I made sure it was a big button. And then when you go to clock out, you log in. Now it says clock out. So it's plainly simple. Yeah. It thinks you're at lunch. Yeah. My wife's job uses Kronos, which so many do, and she has to submit paper things if it needs adjusted. It's like, come on, like, yeah, that doesn't make any sense to me. You should be able to, through the system, type some kind of correction and have it go to the right person. Yeah, I don't know. Do those systems like at Walmart, it has your schedule and the time clock in it? Does Kronos have both or just the time clock? Okay. How about the thing about orbital shift is, yeah, in orbital shift they're completely intertwined. So if you're scheduled, the manager can actually enforce that, like, you can't clock in till 5 minutes before you're scheduled. so people don't just come in and clock in and linger. Yeah, they can with our system. Okay. Yeah, we had it. It was a user setting, but our schedule and time clock were a lot more intertwined than most systems. But I don't know. I wish I could show you the system because then you can layer out and see when people were scheduled and how much they worked and weigh those across each other and all sorts of things that I don't think most of the other system, even in the $1 billion systems like Kronos. Yeah. Uh huh. Mm. Eh. See, our system would be dynamic. So if you're 4 days into a week, it'll, when you view that week, it'll add up what you already worked plus what you're scheduled for the rest of the week and tell the manager what the projected hours were. So say you were scheduled for 38 hours, but you had to stay 3 hours. They can see if you finish your week, you're at overtime, and then they can cut you loose early to avoid overtime because it's like that intertwined. And a lot of places like that a lot. Oh, yeah. Okay, gotcha. All right, so closing down a project, evaluate the team. So you've created this project. You need to do some evaluation. How did it go? And then, of course, now people need to work on another project. Um, Notify that the project is ending and you're going into operation and maintenance mode. Post project reviews, close out customer contract, and then there's a formal sign off that you're done. Now, maintenance. And again, this just depends. Maintenance is different whether it's you're delivering a system that you developed to someone and handing it off to them and you're done, or if you're developing a system that you're going to host in the cloud for them. So the process by which you do maintenance is a little different. So there's two, maybe it's, there's more than two. Corrective maintenance, that means you're fixing errors. So you've given someone a system or you're hosting it, you're fixing problems with it. Then there's adaptive maintenance. So you're just evolving the system. Like now we need this feature, you're going to add that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Perfective maintenance just means you're making it better. You're making it faster. You're adding brand new features. So you're just perfecting the system. And then preventative maintenance. So you're doing things to maybe fix security problems for down the road. You're making a robust security system. You change the website to use HTTPS permanently rather so everything is encrypted. Things like that would be preventative maintenance. Maybe nothing bad has happened. You just identify that it could and you're doing things to prevent that. So the cost of maintenance. And this is kind of, I don't know. I think it's shocking to people that don't work with it. 60 to 80% of the price of the budget is often given to maintenance. Because if you develop something for a year, 6 months, and you deliver it, maintenance might go on for 5 years. So that's a big portion of the cost that typically gets kind of overlooked. So maintenance can either be if you deliver a system and sign a 5-year maintenance contract that you're going to maintain the system, there's some factors that are going to affect how that 5 years goes and what the expense is to you as the organization that delivered the software. So latent defects. So just how many bugs are there in the program? Did you deliver something that was rock solid, or did you deliver this buggy thing that problems are going to pop up every week, and by contract you're obligated to fix them? how many customers are going to use the system, how good is your system documentation, because the maintenance is probably going to include training somehow tied into that. So if it's easy to use and well documented, they're going to be able to take care of it themselves. Maintenance personnel. So do you put the new guy on maintenance? Of course, that's going to maybe cause some problems. What kind of tools do you have to manage the process? How well structured is the program? I mean, as a software engineer, you hold up some kind of ideals in your software. Maintainability is one of the big ones. Extensibility, how easy can you add on to the system? Maintainability, how is this going to be maintained going forward? So a good software engineer shoots for that well-structured program because that will give you extensibility and maintainability. Sorry, I got a one-word text. How do you measure maintenance? So just how many times does the system fail? That's one thing you can measure. How much time between failure? What was the type of failure? And then you get into this, you might have seen this before, the MTBF, the mean time between failures. What's the average time the system goes without errors? So you measure error occurrences over time. That can be a way to indicate the quality of system. And that allows you to compare different systems your organization has created. Which ones have the lower or the higher mean time between failures, which is better. And then you can identify what things did we do different for the ones that have more failures. What's the result? What's causing these? Maintenance requests. Even in orbital shift where we didn't deliver a system, we sell it to someone almost immediately. They're very similar to maintenance requests, though we called them feature requests. Your client starts saying, this is great, but we wish it could do this. Could you make it do this? And I mean, everybody we sold to had ideas for how the system would be better. In an environment like that, though, you got to be careful because it's not personalized for every single place. If you make a change, it affects everybody, though usually you add a setting to allow it to be turned on or off. But to some extent, there's some things you can't do that for. It's going to change it for everybody. If you change the color of the banner at the top of the screen, you're not going to put a setting for the color of the banner per business. It's going to change for everyone. So as these requests came in for us, we had to kind of evaluate them in a lot of ways. Same thing for maintenance request. If it's an error, so here we're saying what type is it? Errors get the highest priority, especially if they're errors that aren't some really obscure thing that might happen once a year. An adaptation, so is this a way to take something that's already there and maybe have it work slightly different, to adapt it? An enhancement, like a enhancement that came with our software. Oh, it'd be nice if we could post messages at the top of the schedule that everyone at the business could see. That was an enhancement that we did. So here's just kind of a flow chart you can go through. So a request comes in. What type is it? An error or other? Errors kind of go to their own path because those are the most important. Then you evaluate the severity of it. If it's not very severe, you kind of add it to a list. I mean, I did a lot of this with Google Sheets, which is a horrible way to do it, but I just didn't have time to implement better software to track all these things. You just list them down. Here's the list of the 50 current known issues, and most of them are super small and don't do anything. They kind of get pushed to the bottom. Some of them would sit there for 2-3 years and never get fixed because it was just so minor that it could never get pushed to the top of the list. So top priorities are the very severe ones. They come back down, they get prioritized. You select the next task. Now to the other side, adaptation versus enhancement. So enhancements, you're going to evaluate, are you going to kill it and tell them, no, we're not doing that. Like, we can't do that. That would require redesigning the whole system. It's impossible. We think that's a horrible idea. You figure out how to tell them without saying it's a horrible idea and making them feel bad. Yeah. And then again, if you're going to do it, it hits the prioritization. And then if it's an adaptation, it's kind of skipping this. I don't know why that skips the kill or do, because those get killed too, but that's how they're laying this out. Now, I kept track of spreadsheets of bugs, of feature requests, prioritized in different ways, tracking who made the request, what business, what individual at that business. So just kind of tracking a lot of information. Of course, there's bug trackers. GitHub has one. They all, there's all sorts of systems for tracking bugs and feature requests. The problem is with that stuff, it's hard to take the time. Just like we're talking about here, implementing a new system, I'm knee deep in development. To stop for a week and evaluate a system for tracking bugs and move the 100 things from bugs and features from a spreadsheet in there, never time. So it just never happened. So it's the same idea. I try to do concurrent on some of those and come up with a way to do it and put the new ones in and keep the old. It always ended up, I just kept using the Google Sheet. Yeah. Yep. There would be. Now, I used our other employees a lot of times once they got pretty good for that. I'd say, this breaks, this is how it happens, go figure out why. And if once they figured out why, they'd report to me, and I'd decide, okay, here's how you should fix it, and I'd tell them to fix it. If I thought it was too difficult, I'd say, all right, go find out why this happens, and I'd fix it myself. So I used my two other developers for that a lot. And then when there wasn't things for them to fix, they would work on features. But yeah, you would definitely. They spent a lot of time testing too as part of that process. Like, all right, I think this release is ready. Have fun spending the next 2 days testing every possible thing to see if it broke by hand, So I got to offload that task that's not very fun to do, and they'd find bugs and come to me, and I'd fix them as we'd go. So that's kind of where a lot of times you start as a tester. That's sort of one of the lower end positions in the software development, and then you kind of work your way up. Configuration management. So if you're delivering a system that someone is installing locally, you want to make sure you're controlling a certain amount of what they can change and configure, because especially if you're contracted to maintain it, you don't want them to tear it apart. So, and also if it's a cloud-based thing, just what can they configure and what can they not? I had a whole system for orbital shift. We had a lot of settings. I didn't show those. You could actually go and check. These are the ones they can see. And what we do is by default, we'd let them see a very small number. They could configure, what day of the week they want their schedule to start on, what hour of the day, some basic things. And then, but there might be 30 or 40 other settings. And then when they call and say, can it do this? You say yes, and you go turn that setting on and show it to them. So you're controlling that configuration. If you just give them everything, they'll be overwhelmed, and they'll configure it in a way that doesn't make sense. So, but it's great when they call and ask you, could you make it do this? And it already does, but they don't know that it can do that. So then you're a hero. So yep. So baseline modules. So this is kind of what I'm saying. A lot of times we do a new feature and hide the setting and turn it on for only some to test it. The baseline modules are the things that everybody gets to use. System librarian. So that's the person who controls that process. I mean, this is again a bigger system. That was just me basically, or our salesman / president / CEO. Build routines. So if you've delivered some code, the build routines are just instructions for how to compile it. Again, there's differences on these depending whether it's delivered code or whether it's cloud hosted code. This is not something that we would have done for Orbital Shift. There's no build routines because we're the one building it. There might be internal stuff for that, but not general stuff. Automated development tools and maintenance. So design documents are maintained instead of source code. This is again for case tools and things like that. Code is generated from design documents. Changes are made during maintenance. Design recovery tools for older systems, so reverse engineering. So just these automated tools aren't as prevalent. When this book was written, these were up and coming, and people thought this was the way things were going to go, and it just didn't really happen. Website maintenance. So this is like Orbital Shift. It's a little different. Special procedures due to the operational status. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's different. Broken link checks. They're just saying you have to manage our links broken. I don't know why that rises to their list of things to worry about, because that's not something I would worry about generally, because just don't break your links. I mean, unless you have a system where there's like a million links, just check them, it's not that complicated. You can actually use tools to just make sure every link follows through to something. So re-registration. So I mean, you'd have to do something pretty major to make your users have to re-register for it. But they're just saying if you make a change big enough, you may have to have them do that. I don't think I've ever used a system where you had to do that. I mean, if you just port that information over. So, I mean, this book is kind of looking at it from a different future editions. And again, it just depends how you're doing things. Like at some point, the decision could have been made at Orbital Shift to say, all right, we're done with this. This is Orbital Shift Classic. And now we're going to make a whole new one. And you can move if you want, or you can stay with the old. I see that a lot on systems. They'll come out with the new version. I think, did Lucidchart do that? One of them, you could click and go to the new version. Yeah, and then eventually they'll get rid of the old version, but for a while they'll let you keep using the one you're used to. Sometimes for a long time they'll let you do that for years, but Orbital Shift never had additions. It just kept evolving as a whole. And if there was things we added that we thought people wouldn't want, that became a setting. So now we did make changes that we didn't do that because we thought 100% no one would want it the old way. That barely works. And then we change it and people would throw a fit. We want it to go back to the old way. Okay. So I don't know. There's a certain point at which if you're going to make big enough changes, you got to way. Yeah. I pretty much always did the settings. And then if you got to a point at which everybody used it on in a certain way, eventually you can get rid of the old way. So we're 4 slides left about this Pine Valley furniture. So again, they keep saying this. It's no different to implement a web base than other, they've said this every time this comes up. Test cases for the Pine Valley furniture. Test cases they're identifying. You want it to be simple functionality. Wait a second. But simple functionality and multiple functionality. They want it to be simple, but they want it to have multiple uses. System, I think, is what they're getting at there. Function chains. They're just saying you develop a path of the things you're going to do in the system as a chain, and you're going to test those. It's sort of like a use case, I would call that. Elective functions, so what things are optional, and then, I don't know, an emergency crisis. So what happens if this part of the system goes down? Bug tracking, alpha and beta testing the web store. So just kind of the steps you're going to go through. And then you're going to install it. So summaries, just we had 4 installation strategies: direct, parallel, single location, phased. Types of documentation, system and user, different types of user training, support for end users. Maintenance, we had 4 types: cost of maintenance, effectiveness of maintenance, and then just those end ones. Now, the exam is yeah, so if you're out there, which I think you are, I accidentally closed Chrome. Okay. Let me just pull up that study guide. Yeah, what I was about to say is I think the summary slides on every one is kind of the stuff that's on those, and at that level is sort of the depth I want you to know, which is pretty much what I put on here. So here's chapter 10. There's 4 installation types. There's 2 audiences for documentation. I mean, it's sort of what was in those summary slides, right? So that's the level I want you to know. If I said, we talked about 4 installation types, list and discuss 2 of them. I mean, that's, direct installation type is this. Hold on, let me look at. I'm gonna look at my test from last semester. I will likely change it by Thursday, but I just want to see what my structure was last time. Oh yeah, last year it was open notes, open book. Maybe I shouldn't have said that until I look at it. I had 7 short answers. And like 40 multiple choice questions. And it's worth 105, but I'll grade it out of 100. Sure, let's do it. Open notes, open book. My counter to it, which is what I usually do in that case, you have to be done by 5 o'clock. Because if I give you a huge amount of time and open book, you could just look every single one up and, right? I mean, that's usually the counter. If you want to do that, you tighten the time, which is also good because I got to drive to Helena after class Thursday. Say that again. No, true or false. No, we'll just do 4 to 5 on Thursday. and I will put a timer on it. Yeah. Now, just don't let that be overconfident, because there's probably 400 PDF slides, right? Because we plowed through a lot of them. And then, some of these questions where I'm asking you to describe and things like that, like, you're not going to be able to just plug down one little sentence off the slide and get full credit. So I think we did cover a lot of material in a short amount of time. So I think that's reasonable. So it ends up being more about how organized can you be and how well can you navigate all that stuff, right? Do you guys ever have open tests in other classes? No? Okay. Well, I guess I'm being nice. I also never gave you a homework assignment last week. So I decided to wait. Robotics, I was at the school from till 9 o'clock on Friday, from 9 to 6 on Saturday, from 1 to 6 Sunday, all day yesterday on my day off. So today is kind of the end of my intense time. Then I'll get your stuff graded and caught up on that. What I was going to say at the beginning, and if it was you, don't be offended. Someone wrote on my evaluations last year that I need less jobs and I need to focus more on this job and stop showing up late and leaving early. So when I was late today, I was thinking about that. Here I am, I'm late again. But I mean, the alternative is you can have someone else teach this that doesn't know about it. I'm not done yet. I was going to just talk for a couple more minutes about some things. And I could totally understand your perspective on that, but like I said, if you, yeah, I don't know. I know it wasn't her, and she's on here because she wrote about the unplanned final on hers. So, and she can hear me, but I can't hear her. All right, so we talked about how you can run Bash shell on Windows. I need to change my resolution so this is actually visible. I'll deal with the scaled resolution on my screen so you guys can see, because it's not doing very well downscaling 1080p to 760. Right though. Huh. I thought this was the resolution of the projector and that would match, but it's cutting it off. Because otherwise you're not gonna be able to see. Well, we're not gonna do this for very long. So Microsoft has become very much more friendly towards open source in the last 5 years. Like almost everything they do for tools and stuff is open source. They let people target the .NET framework now from Linux, so all sorts of things. But they decided, I think probably what their motivation was is there's a lot of tools for building software and things on Linux that aren't on Windows. And in wanting to get people to use Windows, they said, well, we'll provide a way you can do that within Windows. So they came up with Bash for Windows. So it's Bash on Ubuntu on Windows. So Bash is the shell that you run typically on Linux and definitely on Ubuntu. At first glance, it just looks like they gave you a Linux command line in Windows, but it actually implements most of the subsystems of a Ubuntu Linux system. Now, there's some tools that involve port scanning and some networking things that I've encountered that don't work, but most of it does work. So I can run, this is just like if I was on a Linux machine. I can run all the standard Linux commands. You know, it's if config to view your IP addresses on Linux. Oh, I got to start it as administrator to get access to some of the things. So if you're interested in experimenting with Linux commands, almost everything you can do. Oops. It's beeping in my ear. A barrel won't work. Yeah, I don't know why that's not working. You know, the one thing I really wanted to use this for was to run Nmap, which will scan networks for IP addresses and tell you all the IP addresses on that network, which when you plug a Raspberry Pi into a network that uses a DHCP server and you have no idea to find the IP address of the Raspberry Pi, Nmap is really nice, but it doesn't work in here. Although, yeah, okay, DAS, what is it? SP. Huh. It looks like it would work if I could remember the command I want to do. I just got to see what IP address I got on here. 10.17.220.29. Yeah, cannot buy. I don't know. I'll have to mess with it. I had not been able to get it to work. But most things you can do in Linux, it's just like running a Linux system. I can do top. I can see what's running. So in order to get this, all you got to do is go to your control panel and your add remove programs and turn Windows features on and off. It's in there and you got to scroll down. It's not named Bash in here. It's yeah, it's Linux subsystem. Where is it? Yeah, Windows subsystem for Linux, and you just check that. Yeah, it's only on Windows 10, and you have to have the anniversary update that came out a while ago now. If you have the current version, it can do it. Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's similar. The nice thing is, though, this has direct access through the subsystem, like so performance-wise and stuff. It's not emulated. It's actually just take a Linux binding to the system and tie it straight into Windows. So it's fast. Now, there's no GUI on here. You can install one. I've just never done it because you have Windows. Why would you want to install a GUI? The reason you do it is for doing command line Linux stuff, you know? So, yeah. I don't remember ever doing that, but I believe you. It'll probably make you do it, right? Once you turn it on. So this is sort of like having access to a Raspberry Pi right inside your computer. Now, I still recommend playing with a Raspberry Pi like you are because that teaches you about SSHing into that machine. But now I have a Linux machine here. If I want to try SSHing into my Raspberry Pi, I can do it from the command line, not from using like PuTTY or something, you know? Yeah, so I could do SSH. I'd have to look up. I don't have these embedded in my head, but you can kind of practice interacting Linux machine to Linux machine, which is, yeah, yeah. But I mean, I typically use PuTTY to connect to my Raspberry Pis. You know, I use FileZilla when I want to move files. Well, you know, connect directly and learn to use what is it, SCAP or things to transfer files over SSH. So I have found a lot of use for it lately because of robotics and communicating to our Raspberry Pis and um, just needing to do things that I wanted to be on Linux here, especially because our Raspberry Pis, the way the robot board is set up, it has its own little access point, and then the Raspberry Pis are hooked to that. So you got to connect to the Wi-Fi, connect in, scan the network to find what the IP address of the Pi is, things like that. So, and just though it looks like Nmap is going to work on here, which I don't know why it didn't work before. It is a full Linux system underneath. It's not just here's a command line that looks like it's Linux. It actually is Ubuntu Linux. So, um, yeah, you can navigate through the whole structure and see it's just like any other Linux system. I love doing everything with dark background, but it projects horribly. So, yep, Bash for Windows. So test Thursday, Tuesday development, and I'll go through the Android and the some of the GitHub and maybe a little more of this sprinkled in when we have more time. Good. If you have questions before Thursday about the test, want clarification, open your book and look at it. You can ask me. Yeah, you got to be here. Actually, wait, do you have to be here if it's open? Okay, hold on. It's a good discussion to have. I think I made it open book last time, now that I think of it, because I didn't require the people were here, because I make the assumption if you let people take it wherever, they're going to use their books even if you tell them not to, because that's what everybody does. So yeah, I could make it available the entire day, and but you could only have an hour to take it, and we could just bag coming here at all. It would make my life easier. Okay, so I don't know, 7 a.m. through midnight on Thursday. Find an hour somewhere in that period, and we just won't meet at all. Because otherwise, you know, I rush out of here at 5 and I got to drive to Helena, and it's just I'm cutting it, and then it just makes it a little easier. Okay, let's do it. I'll give you all day Thursday. I won't do it at midnight. I'll make it like 7 a.m. so that if you have trouble, I'm not sleeping, you know, so I can help fix it. All right, perfect. You know, it's not using Docker.